Morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone in person. Good morning, everyone on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. We were just having a conversation if the term Super Saturday really fools anyone as to if this is a really super day. So it's a really busy day. But thank you all for joining us. It's an important day. We kicked it off Thursday. So we'll have folks in the audience and we have folks on Zoom. I see many of the folks here know kind of the process that we go through. But we literally start by going through RC by RC through the budget book. And then the board asks questions and comments. And then I reached out to our partners that work with us throughout the budget season. So we'll be also hearing from the Board of Finance, RTM Education, RTM F&B, CDSP, and CPAC, and then opening up to public comment. So that'll be the process through the day. There are points in time where there are breaks, which will take a quick bathroom coffee break, and then there's a lunch break too, but we'll keep it moving as best as possible since everyone's giving up a Saturday in their time. But thank you again all for being here. So I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, January 10th at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. So we will proceed. So we will start with the discussion of the superintendent's proposed 2023-2024 personnel, operating, and equipment budgets. And we'll start with the RCs. So I see some of our friends. I know our principals who were here Thursday night are Zooming in, so they don't have to travel down. So we appreciate that. So Alan, before we kick it over to RC1 and Mrs. Dunn, anything you'd like to add as we kick this off this morning?
No, I just one more time, just would like to thank people who are in person, who are giving their time online, and again, for all the preparation for our administrative team, both at Central Services and in the building. So we look forward to sharing the respective RCs. Thank you.
Thank you. I will echo that from all the Thursdays from Thursday night. Great. So Mrs. Dunn, good morning. Can you hear us, Ellen?
Hi, I can hear you, and now I can see you.
All right. Good.
Good morning.
Seeing you on Zoom with the guitar in the background. It's somewhat soothing.
I wish I could play it, but it's
I
okay.
was just going to say, at one point in time, maybe you'll have to entertain us. So.
Well, yeah, you definitely don't want to hear me singing right now after the flu and COVID, but yes.
Good. Well,
maybe another
time.
Turn
it over to you and the Darien High School. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would love first to say thank you to the Board of Education and our community and our parents for supporting the work of Darien High School. We are grateful as an entire staff for the privilege of working with the most wonderful young people that we can imagine. And so we're proud of them. We're proud of their accomplishments. And we're especially proud of them for overcoming overwhelming obstacles in the last few years. And their spirit and kindness and excitement for learning is unmatched in my view. So as educators, all of us ultimately are concerned about their growth, their well-being, and their readiness for the future, and to take the next steps beyond our doors with confidence, and providing for them a strong academic foundation, and also an investment in who they are as young people, independent, resilient, and curious to move forward as lifelong learners. And so we appreciate the budget allocations that are shared with our community, our school community every year from our wonderful Darien community, provide an excellent education for our students who we care for and love so much. So we begin every year.
Ellen, I'm gonna ask you if you could just make sure your speaker is close as possible.
Okay. Yeah.
Just want to make sure all our folks in the audience can hear us.
Thank you. We begin every year in the budget process by taking a look at the enrollment projections for the following year. And for next year, we see an overall growth by 11 students predicted for the high school, which brings the DHS population to an expected 1428 enrollment. So I think as I present the updates and requests for RC1, I'll present in order of appearance on the spreadsheet, beginning with personnel and then moving down to the operating budget so that we can follow along together. So the first change in personnel is due to the approval of an exciting American Sign Language course in our World Language Department, which was recently approved by the Board of Education, and we anticipate that we will require an additional 0.2 FTE to offer this exciting new course offering. The overall projected increase of 11 students can be accommodated by our current FTE, with 2 areas of exception because of concern about some of the high levels of enrollment in courses. And those 2 areas are in the area of PE and health and science, as was highlighted in our class size report back in October to the board. So we did bring a request last year as well for 0.6 FTE in the area of physical education and health. And once again, we are experiencing some class sections, in fact, 20 sections per semester that have between 28 and 30 students. And as we discussed last year, that number of students in a physical education environment is certainly appropriate and can be managed safely and without much burden to the course and curriculum. However, when those same students are in a classroom setting to have the health component of their curriculum, it is contributing to, I think, an impact on the kinds of discourse that can be happening in those classes. 30 students in a classroom setting is not typical anywhere, as you know, in any other department within our school. We really are highlighting health and well-being, and I think it's important for us to make sure that we create health environments where students have the opportunity to discuss and share and learn about all aspects of well-being. Moving on to science. The average class size in our science classes, as we reported in October, is 20. And comparably in the other departments, English is at 19, history, world language, and mathematics are all at 18. We currently have 23 classes out of 75 in the science department this semester that are running at exactly 24, which is the maximum for our science classes. So we're requesting for next year an increase of 2 sections of science, which is 0.5 FTE in the science department. And this will alleviate some of those growing average class sizes and continue to accommodate the requests of our students. Some of these areas are areas of courses, for example, honors chemistry, where there are not as many sections as you might see, for example, in a biology 9th grade course. And so with only 4 or 5 sections, maxing out at 24 leaves very little flexibility for students to be added into a class or for them to get the class that they are requesting. So we would respectfully ask for 2 sections of science for next year as well. Next on the spreadsheet, you'll see that we are predicting that we will need 1 section of our IDEA course for next year in the 9th grade. We currently have 2 sections, but we expect that the numbers coming in from 9th grade will be able to be accommodated by 1 section, and that represents a decrease of 0.2 FTE in that area. So we also have made a request in account 101003, which is clubs and councils. This, I will say, is such an important part of our budget, and we appreciate the support of this particular account because our students, our faculty, our families all value the wonderful clubs and activities that we have at DHS, especially with the concerns and importance of connections and relationships between students and adults. This is one of the most important pieces of the budget when it comes to students finding their friends and colleagues and adults who share tremendous areas of interest. And so one of those areas is in the area of robotics that began 2 years ago. And we are requesting that we provide $6,602 to continue the robotics program following the 2-year donation generously provided by the Darien Foundation to us. There is, you might note, a remaining increase of $6,390 on this line. And that is the result of the contractual increase to existing stipends. I might stop here for a second and turn over to Mr. Rudel because there is an introduction in RC1 about some changes to the substitute line. And I know that's a district-wide proposal, so perhaps he'd like to jump in and
Sure.
handle that one.
Sure. So there's a proposal for both daily subs and building subs. So if we look at daily subs, we currently pay $100 a day, which equates to about $15.38 an hour, or 38 cents above minimum wage from June in the state of Connecticut. Our fill rate has been about 50% this year. With the teacher shortage, there's also a substitute shortage throughout the district, throughout the state. So typically subs will go wherever they can get the most money. Considering that money is a small dollar amount for them. So we are recommending increasing that to $125 per day. That would put us in line with districts like New Canaan to hopefully be a little bit more competitive to improve our fill rates as the year progresses. The bigger changes with the building subs, we are recommending moving to a building substitute model. We currently have 2, but they work 4 days a week. And the reason they work 4 days a week is to avoid potential penalties as it relates to the Affordable Care Act. So while we don't necessarily consider substitutes employees, the federal government considers anybody who works over 30 hours a week a employee. So if you work over 30 hours a week, the Affordable Care Act does require that you offer what they consider affordable health insurance to at least 95% of your employees. Because we have ELP, which is a 4-day-a-week program, we're very close to that 95% threshold as it is right now. So you don't have to necessarily offer insurance to dependents or spouses, things like that. You do have to offer insurance to the individual. So we are recommending going to 5 days a week with the offer of what's considered affordable insurance, which would have to be less than 9.12% of their income. So that would be a 15% premium share at single cost based on our current insurance model. We are recommending going to 3 per building instead of 2. With the offset being the elimination of the student interns. And one of the reasons we've talked about this in finance committee, we've had a lot of difficulty finding student interns, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. I believe the high school specifically and the middle school actually haven't found interns, I think, in the last 2 years. The elementary has been a little bit more successful. And so that's a way to alleviate some of the cost. So even though we're looking at 21 building substitutes, we did not budget necessarily insurance for all 21. So just as we do with all our employees, we kind of look at a census, we make assumptions about who might take insurance, who might not take insurance. So if, for example, we have over 800 employees, only about 600 currently take insurance. So obviously we're not budgeting insurance for those other 200 employees. Otherwise your budget would be much larger and we'd be giving a lot more money back to the town at the end of the year. So we look at the demographics of what building subs we currently have. If you're making $150 a day over 180 days, it's about $27,000 a year. It's not a significant amount of money. So under the Affordable Care Act, employees an individual is allowed to stay on their parents' insurance up till the age of 26. So we look at how many of those employees are under the age of 26. If you're making $27,000 a year in Fairfield County, you're probably still living at home. You're probably still with your parents' insurance. And then we also look at demographics of those above the age of 65, because at 65, you can go on Medicare. So if we're assuming if you're under the age of 26, you're probably not going to take insurance. If you're over the age of 65, you're also probably not going to take insurance because you're getting it from somewhere else. So of the 21, we budgeted insurance for 11, which is actually probably still pretty conservative. Odds of 11 of 21 building subs making $27,000 a year taking single insurance is probably still pretty small. But conservatively, we did budget that. Building subs tend to give schools a little bit more consistency in terms of coverage. They're there 5 days a week. They're there. They're the first person to fill an absence. And so one of the things we also looked at is the wage rate that we pay building subs. We did include charts within the budget book, and you can see currently New Canaan pays $274 a day, which for them is the bachelor step 1. From our understanding and talking to New Canaan, that might not be sustainable for them going forward. Other districts are paying 150, other districts are paying 130, 125. It kind of is all over the map. And so the idea is to be out in front of our peers so that we can be the first district to attract those subs and then really improve the fill rate throughout the district.
If I could just add that these changes are based on direct feedback, first from the subs who, when they ask to be taken off the sub list, they say they can make money someplace else. We've been at a disadvantage for years, offering only 4 days to the permanent building subs. We've been losing them. Again, they tell us that they're going to a district where they can work 5 days a week. In addition, exit interviews with teachers, one of the reasons that they cite for leaving is the number of classes that they're asked to cover. And the principals and the assistant principals do whatever they can. Principals are teaching classes, assistant principals, we're pulling interventionists to cover. So this is not coming from nowhere. It's really direct feedback from the stakeholders.
It also impacts professional development for our staff who often are pulled away from the professional development because there's no coverage.
So Marge and Rich, thank you very much. And we'll, all right, let's pause there for a moment. Ellen, anything else with respect to the high school that you wanted to talk about?
Yes, please. So
Your microphone is off. Let's finish. So here's my thought process. Let's finish with the high school. Let's ask Ellen questions specific to the high school. And I think everyone's interested in a broader conversation around the substitutes. Does that make sense? Good. All right, Ellen. So thank you, Ellen. If you could just finish up from a high school.
Okay.
Thank you.
You can hear me now? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
We have two very important proposals for positions connected to student wellness and mental health awareness at DHS. The first is the Wellness Center Coordinator. This position, if approved, will be funded through a grant, so it's not included in an increase in FTE in the budget, but we wanted to discuss this with you as an important part of our plan that we have been working on this fall. We have worked very closely, as you know, internally and with our local agency partners, and we appreciate so much the support of those important advisors to us. And the Wellness Center at DHS has been piloted with great success this fall. It is a welcoming environment where students find a comfortable space. They can disconnect from technology and academics and focus on relaxation techniques, reducing stress, and improving wellness. The increase here of 1.0 FTE is requested for staffing the Wellness Center to increase the hours of operation. Currently, we have our entire support staff rotating through the lunch extended period, and the Wellness Center is open during that portion of the day each day. This coordinator position would assume the primary role in arranging and implementing activities delivered through the Wellness Center and would be a facilitator to any clinical resources that students may need if any students are in distress. So we envision this to be a weekly calendar of events that would be shared with the school community related to activities, programming such as yoga, mindfulness, meditation, stress management techniques, a proactive educational program coming out of that wellness center. We would like to build on the momentum we've seen and the interest shown by our students. It also sends a clear message that the school values well-being and recognizes that mental health must be addressed and must be nurtured. This position would provide a consistent adult in this environment with students who can develop relationships with those students and would facilitate connections to our clinicians when necessary. The coordinator would interface with our counseling staff, our support team, our connections counselor, and would provide wellness for all students out of this wonderful space. We also have tremendous support from our DHSPA, who are working with us to provide furniture and take the next step with the space. The second position related to wellness is found in account 12001. It's been placed in consultant services. And as you know, we've been reviewing various models for improved support at the high school, and we bring forth a recommendation to partner with Kids in Crisis out of Greenwich to provide a mental health clinician whose focus is support students and families at DHS. We expect this position will allow access to support for a greater number of students and their families. The Teen Talk program would place a clinician at DHS who would work collaboratively with a team, and the Teen Talk counselor would also work closely with the Wellness Center coordinator just described to put forward programming and education proactively in the school community. Teen Talk counselors also interact with Kids in Crisis Outreach Crisis, which is the after hours portion of the Kids in Crisis model. And the relationship that would be established while in the building would be a tremendous benefit to any outside support that's needed beyond the school day. This service of the outreach crisis prevention is 365 days a year and 24 hours a day. So it really extends support for students outside during vacations, during periods of time when they're not interacting with the school directly. I think it's important to note that the priority of this individual through Kids in Crisis and Teen Talk would be in crisis management and support, both in school and out of school in times when students are facing distress. They have greater flexibility in terms of their schedule than would, let's say, a school psychologist or social worker who is a school employee. Obviously, our team of counselors, social workers, school psychologists, connection counselors are interacting with students all day long and are expert in doing that work. They are, as school employees, involved in a lot of different activities. So a counselor may be working with a family at 2 o'clock on the college process with their junior and family. The counselors may be presenting a guidance seminar. A school psychologist may be presenting at a PPT. The demands of school life are real and are scheduled, and an important part of those school employees' work in our school. The advantage here for the Teen Talk clinician would be that as an independent person and not a school employee, those demands on their schedule would not be in place, and they have therefore a really refined, clear focus on the well-being of students who may need intensive support for a period of time. There are 16 schools who have a Teen Talk counselor in place. Those are in middle schools and in high schools. And we also know that one of the areas of concern right now is extending and finding outside clinicians outside of the school for referrals for continued work with our students. And so we know that and hope that this relationship with Kids in Crisis may also allow us to connect our students more easily to clinicians outside of the school who may be able to make space to see our students when they need that support. The model of Teen Talk provides for professional development for that counselor. So Kids in Crisis provides that professional development. They have supervisors with whom they work at Kids in Crisis, and they have a point person within the building who is also their connection to the DHS staff. The DHS staff would be involved with the interview process and the selection of the clinician should this be approved. And that follows the work that's done by Kids in Crisis to already vet the candidates that they would bring forward to us. So we have received widely supportive feedback from our the schools in which the Teen Talk program is operating, and would hope that the Board of Education would support this role for the high school. There are just a few more things in the operating budget. Account 22003, the consumable textbooks. You might remember last year that we saw an increase in this account because of AP Spanish enrollment. The elementary Spanish program resulted in the acceleration of a group of students. And so we ended up really this year with 209 students in AP Spanish, which is wonderful. But that was the result of the class of 2023 and the class of 2024 landing at the same time in AP Spanish. So we have 10 sections running this year. Next year, we expect to be back to a typical enrollment and of about 5 sections. And so the $6,770 reduction is because we won't need as many of those AP Spanish consumable books for next year. Account 102003, other student activities. Unfortunately, we have removed the $6,000 of funding for the China exchange here, as we do not expect the program to be able to run next year. As you know, these funds are typically for welcoming our guests, and it appears that that will be not a possibility for next year, but we certainly hope that we keep those relationships going and that we continue that program a year out from now. And then the last item, account 73001, equipment and furniture. This is a request from the science department for 12 microscopes to replace equipment that's no longer repairable. And as you know, our microscopes are used at all levels, 9, 11, and 12 for all sorts of wonderful biological sciences, both at the 9th grade and in electives for our juniors and seniors. So that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, Alan. Thank you very much, Alan. So I think the best way to tackle this is I think we have a conversation around the substitutes. I think there's a lot of new information and good information here around Teen Talk and the center up at the high school. So that's another conversation. But first, maybe let's focus on anything question-wise for Ellen with respect to kind of day-to-day operating at the high school. John.
Good morning. I guess I'd like to understand the math around the PE class size. So I did some crunching of the numbers while you outlined it. So you in the booklet, and I think you stated, Ellen, that 1/3 of the PE classes have a average class size of 28 to 30.
Yes.
Okay, and then the average class size for all the classes are 24. It's
Right.
stated in the book. So if you back into what 2/3 of the average class size is, I got a number of close to 21. So I know it's kind of difficult logistically, and I think we discussed that last year, kind of, I think with the strings of from the Beautiful Mind movie and trying to figure out how to fit resources with classes and schedules. But is there no way to get closer to that 22 to 24 without adding and again, we're talking about 0.6, but basically rejig your
Understood. Yeah. It really is driven by what you described. You're absolutely correct that there are classes. There are 20 classes at the 28 to 30. There are classes that are at 20 and 18 as well. And it really is driven by the course selections that students choose. And we obviously, I think, do the very best we can to accommodate those academic choices first, and all of the things that are needed for a student's success and support, whether that be team taught classes or co-taught classes or lab instruction that we're adding to a schedule. So there are many constraints on a student's plan, and I think we're very proud of the fact that we do the very, very best on an individual basis with our counselors to create schedules for students that reflect their interests and choices, and find ways to make that work for our students. So that being said, the PE and health sections often are the last things that are going to be included in the schedule, not because we don't think they're important, but because we have a lot of flexibility in terms of the sections. And so that's the reason that we do get some imbalance, and we do try to balance all parts of the schedule before we open school in August each year. So I understand the question, and I want you to know that we do our very best to correct for that.
Yeah, it's a striking difference between the average class size when you talk about 30 versus 18. And I guess the realization just hit me as we broaden our course offerings. And if there these, classes only offered one period a day, or, within the schedule, maybe that's not the right way to put it. It gets more complex in trying to meet the needs from an academic perspective and prioritizing over health. So thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Sarah.
Morning, Ellen. I have a question
Morning.
about the science teacher. Is that an additional body that we will have to hire, or is that something that 0.5, can that come from existing faculty?
It may be existing faculty as overage. Right now we have an overage of 0.5 already in the department, so it might require or make sense to make that a full-time position and hire rather than give overages to teachers. It's not the ideal solution from my perspective to have the overages. So if it's possible to hire, the tricky thing about science, however, is that there are distinct certifications. So depending on where we end up putting that 0.5, it may be in chemistry, and then it may also be in biology, and you may not have a teacher who has both certifications. So
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Julie.
Thank you. Good morning, Ellen.
Good morning.
I have a couple questions around the wellness coordinator and
Julie, we're gonna
Oh, I'm
focus on the operating
forgive
to
me.
start. No, just make sure everyone's clear.
Got it.
We'll focus on the operating. We'll do the substitutes. We'll do the wellness. So
Gotcha.
that works. Good.
All
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Good. Mr. Maroney.
So more of
aka Dennis.
a general question than a budget question is the China exchange program we haven't done now for 3 years. Are we exploring other exchange programs?
Well, we have, as you know, increased the opportunities through the World Language Department, not through exchange, but through obviously those enrichment programs. So those have been running and are robust and continue. I think we are hoping, we've continued our relationship with the schools in terms of communication. Shanghai school this year had an anniversary. We sent photos of our past practices and our former exchanges. And so we're continuing those relationships and hoping that the program can, we hoped that this year it would, but circumstances have just not allowed that. But we do hope to bring the program back. It was a very valuable program, I think, to the community.
Thanks, Dennis. Jill.
Would you all please provide a model of what enrollment would look like across sections if we added those two teachers so we can see, what the highs and lows would be? I get that you'll have to guess a little bit, but that'll give us a sense of where we are versus our policy. Thank you.
Tara?
So I know this isn't new and it's been in here. Obviously, this position's been here for a while, but as we know, our budget is getting larger year after year. And as Rich had mentioned on Thursday, insurance costs will probably be going up because we have had a good deal for the past few years. So I keep looking at positions that aren't teaching, that aren't interfacing with students directly. So I would just like to look at what exactly department chairs are doing, what their day-to-day looks like, and curriculum supervision, why the difference between curriculum supervision versus department chair, just to get an idea of what's happening there on a day-to-day basis in that position.
Thanks, Tara. Dennis.
So I don't know if I'm going to venture into be a segue to the wellness coordinator, and this is more of a request to Rich on the wellness coordinator that will be funded by a grant. I think would be helpful for me, and I hope the rest of the board agrees, to see and you mentioned it in our superintendent's report of there are 17 FTEs minus the 8 from security. But there are also a couple of positions that were funded by grants in previous years. And I would love to separate this out of what are total new hires and what are rollovers from grants and what are, because I think it's this grant that we're taking money from a grant and then it's automatically assumed that they become a full-time equivalent following that. And it just becomes this added part of the budget. And in talking to people, like everything in here makes sense, but the budget's too big. You need to cut it. But you can't cut it because you're already backed into a lot of positions that we're expected to fill.
Let's get that outlined in there.
You want something different than that?
Maybe. Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of data. There's a lot of data. So if there are no more operating, are there more operating questions? Otherwise, else I was going to use Dennis's segue. No.
It's a quick one.
Go ahead, Julie.
Very quick one. If possible, I was just going to ask if we could see what languages are taught in the world language departments at other schools in our DIRG. Just love to understand what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, I think that in response to Mr. Maroney, that we can, Mr. Maroney, we can actually delineate it a wee bit further than that because we're suggesting putting this one in the other grant. We can delineate that further here.
Good. Thank you. Are we good? Go ahead, Jill.
Because you're doing some other work with grants.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you.
Dennis?
And just one last comment, and it's not a budget related, but I think Julie was just touching on it. I really must say, I am very excited about the sign language being offered at the school. I think, again, I wish we offered it at middle school and even elementary school. And talking to some colleagues just this week, we had 4 different people from 4 different regions, and we were just lamenting that it can be so difficult to communicate, and sign language could be one way if the rest of the world all worked. It'd be a beautiful way to communicate with people who don't speak the same language you do. So kudos to us.
Thank you, Dennis.
Mrs. Beth, was that world languages at the high school or was it up and down the system? The request you made.
Durham.
Well, I was asking high school, but I guess middle school and high school would really be ideal.
Relative to the
Please.
DIRG.
Yes, relative to
Yeah,
the
so
DIRG.
I hear what you're saying, because we've added Mandarin and now we're potentially adding ASL. So
Right.
what else could potentially be coming down?
Anything else on operating? So using Dennis's segue, I think your segue was on wellness. So we'll move over to a conversation around, we've had information presented to us about the wellness coordinator. And then in line with that, I think it goes hand in hand is from a consultant services standpoint, the Kids in Crisis, the Teen Talk program. So I'll open that up for board questions. Sarah.
Thank you. I have to say, I'm very excited to see the focus on mental health continuing in our budget this year. I do have, I don't know if concern is too strong of a word, but so we hired Dr. Dad to come in. She's not starting until March. Part of her hire, we've asked her to do some sort of review, 30, 60, 90 day, whatever. And I'm sure she will have some suggestions coming out of, what she finds. So the addition of Teen Talk, well, I very much am in favor of this idea. Have we talked to her about whether or not she is in favor of this idea? I just want to make sure that we're all kind of in line. So just any further ideas of what that position will have in relation to the addition of the wellness coordinator and Teen Talk.
Thank you, sir.
We can address some of that.
Tara. Do you want to?
Who's going to answer?
Go ahead.
Alan, I can address some of it, or you can address some of it. That's fine. We're very conscious of Dr. Gadden. Pleased that Dr. Dad, when she comes on board in March, will essentially lead that. I will say even things within the middle school and stuff, and taking a look. The Teen Talk Center, the Wellness Center has been so successful and it's utilized so much. Honestly, I don't want to wait for another series of months. It could be another budget process for it to go through. We feel that need is appropriate, and much the same as the Teen Talk Center, that we think that we're ready to move forward to that. We feel we've got enough feedback on it that would be a useful program. And yes, when she comes on board, that won't preclude an evaluation and an ongoing review of the practice we have in place. And we did think long and hard about, do we move these forward now, or do we do what you're suggesting? Do we wait? We felt that it was appropriate to move these forward, and we've had enough experiences at the high school to suggest that they would be well used at this point.
Has she been brought in on this, Alan? Sorry, sir.
She has not until she starts. She hasn't been brought in the full discussion on this.
Do you happen to know if any of this she's worked in have used Teen Talk? Where she has worked previously?
I would be speculating at this point.
I'm just curious if she's familiar with the program.
Certainly the New Canaan, Wilton, Westport, Stamford, all of those areas. I've talked to those. I've followed up with all of those superintendents to talk about particularly Teen Talk in terms of the success of it and how they felt that program was working and the validity of the program, so on and so forth. So that's what I've done. We follow up. Alan, I don't know if you want to say anything or not, but
no, I do know, we're planning to hold meetings soon with our a team of advisors and experts that we've been working with throughout the fall, again, before the end of January. And I know that Scott was planning to invite her to participate in some of those conversations going forward. And I would say that with regard to the Teen Talk, I've also had communication with our sister school principals on the success of the program. So I'm confident that this is a good recommendation. And we have carefully piloted the Wellness Center for the same reasons, to see how students respond before coming forth with a proposal. So I think we're in good shape with these two recommendations.
Ellen, I think I probably knew this at some point in time, but I don't now. What are the current hours of the Wellness Center, and then this would basically make, what would the hours be?
Well, right now the hours are from about 11 to 12:45. That's the lunch wave. So it's almost 2 hours open each day. But this would provide one person who is able to keep the Wellness Center open for the full day. And we have had requests for students to come at other times, and for teachers who have even said, I'll go and open the Wellness Center for a period if I can change my duty to the Wellness Center. So there is a lot of interest in greater flexibility, because obviously the student has to be free during that lunch wave to be able to take advantage of it currently.
And you have the space you need up there?
Yes, we do.
Okay. John?
I believe at the last meeting, in response to Tara's question, that we were going to kind of break this wellness, mental health discussion out into another discussion. So I don't know how deep we want to go today. But in response to what Ellen was saying in regards to the layers that we're newly implementing on this subject, I think of, we brought up the director of mental health, but we're adding a school psychologist within the budget. I know the FTE was already there, but I'd really like to understand how the layers of the psychologist, counselors, director of mental health, now this consultant, the kids in crisis, the wellness coordinator, and then how the town resources, the community resources / clergy fit in, and then how private resources, also fit into this. So I think, again, in response to the crisis, we reacted broadly with speed, but I really would love to have a deeper discussion and check-in terms of how we're adding these layers and how they fit in and how they're coordinating with each other. And to Sarah's point, our director of mental health is also coming in the midst of all this. So I think I'm just kind of piling on Tara's request that I think we're in deep need to have a more in-depth discussion around this subject.
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. I think as a board and as a community, I think we will support anything when it comes to the mental health of our students. Being a visual person, I'm like needing an org chart. I'm needing a flow chart. I'm needing connect all the dots. I think, John, you did a nice summary. So I think that's where we're headed. If there's some more questions we've got on the table, we will, but I think we'll have to talk about our agendas and how we get a presentation on this, but I'll move quickly over to Dave.
Yeah, just following up on that. I know I've heard wellness center is a success. I guess the question which will come and what we're going to get in terms of what John's asking for is what are the indicia of success? How do we measure that? How do we know? What does success mean? And that would apply also to Teen Talk and some of these other things we're rolling out. How are we measuring success?
Thank you, Dave. Katie.
Thank you. I echo that I would love to see more of a presentation. I have lots of questions about that, but just for the immediate right now, I was just curious as to who both of these positions, the wellness coordinator and the clinician from Teen Talk, who they would report to and what the expected credentials would be for each position.
Thank you. Julie.
Thank you. I would add to that. I want to make sure that we know that Teen Talk has the resources, the human resources for this, if this is where we're headed, because I know that that's a challenge lately, and what the credentials of that individual would look like. And is all of this solely purely additional, or does this replace anything that we have in both cases, the wellness coordinator and bringing in the consultant? And I think my understanding is we're talking about a person through Teen Talk, a 10-month person probably, but access to the services 12 months, 365, 24/7. But I would love also a bigger conversation about this. And I think also just to call it out now, I think a discussion about how we track success here is something that we have to be prepared to have a hard conversation about, because that's not going to be an easy tracking approach to determine success of programs of this sort. Thanks.
That's good. I think, Julie, as you were talking, as everyone talking, a couple of things that popped into my head is just the coordination of it with the town, the coordination of it with Fitch Academy. I know all these resources are available to Fitch, but Fitch is in a separate building. But the coordination with the town, the other thing that just popped into my head too, is we have a lot of young people in town that don't necessarily attend our schools. And, that's where I want to understand the community connection here, because we have a lot of students that attend, various schools throughout the other communities here, but are very good friends with our students, participate in a lot of activities. So how is all that outreach done? So Dennis.
So I would echo my colleagues that I think we need to determine how do we measure and monitor and things like this. But I think and to build on just what you were saying, Duke, is, I have scratched in my notes Fitch and Middlesex, and just, You know, why is it just under RC1? Why is this not a district-wide approach? And I guess my question is to the board, to the administration of why did we consult with Kids in Crisis to determine that one clinician is all we need? Or is this something we're budgeting and we're saying to them, we want to hire one? And how did that come across? How did that come to be that we're hiring a clinician?
Just to build on that, I would love
Yeah,
to know
Sarah.
the middle school model too. Like, is
Yeah.
this something that other districts are using at the middle school level as well? We potentially see that in the future.
Well, I think mental health, wellness, any type of consultant service, I just like to see how it fits in with all the schools. I think there's. Jill.
I have one, but I think Tara.
Okay, Tara.
But before I ask a question, Teen Talk does do a very nice presentation and they do have a lot of information there that they do tracking. So you can actually follow a lot of the success. Yes, they do have a middle school model as well. The 90,000 is per clinician. They are licensed professional counselors. So they have masters in clinical mental health practice, whether it's social work or what have you. I am obviously very in support of the program. New Canaan's had them for 20 years. They've moved them to the middle school as well. So obviously it's been successful for them. But that being said, I still would like to see a presentation and know exactly how they're going to fit in within the school system. We keep hearing the word collaboration. They're supposed to be independent. That does make me a little nervous. It kind of takes away part of what they're supposed to be. Two, yes, I'm curious about the director of mental health wellness coordinator overlap. And then off of that, but on psychologists, you know, I would like to, again, see caseloads, hearing just different things about special education teachers, possibly administering WISC tests, because we don't have enough psychologists. And I'm curious about that as well.
Thank you, Tara. Jill.
So just building towards the presentation. I also would like to understand the capacity of Kids in Crisis, because we're talking about a 24-hour model, not just a school day model. And that sounds like a lot for 90,000. So I just want to make sure I understand how it's staffed and what the capacity is. I also would really like to understand the goal of the Wellness Center. I get what's written here, but you know, I think I just do want a more expansive presentation on what we're trying to accomplish. I'd like to know who was consulted to build, you know, as part of building both of these. And I do think that while it is a challenge to talk about success in terms of mental health, I do think we do want to have some specific goals, whether it's we served a certain number of students. I do think we want to make sure that we know what we're trying to accomplish with each of these. We're clear about that. And then when we look back in 6, 12, 18, several years' time, we can say we are or we're not meeting the goals of the program. So I want to, in both cases, make sure that we're clear on what that is. And then I'll echo the general different components of it, but the more vertical look at the ages that we serve, and then also making sure that we have a big picture look at how this dovetails with other things, including the director of mental health, psychologists, et cetera. Thank you.
So not to throw another wrench in this, but just so we connect all the dots, I would like in that presentation, I am concerned now because if there's a need up there, it grows. I just want to understand from a facility standpoint, what you have, what you use, what you may need. To me, a lot of this centers around privacy. So how do we tackle that? A classroom does not equate to privacy. And then I think we should connect the dots with the SRO in that I hear constant great feedback about the SRO and how the SRO interacts with our students. So that's another component of the director of mental health, the director of the wellness center, Teen Talk. You've got, you know, another person in the mix there that our students are very comfortable talking to. So, all right. So I'll pause there for a moment. Go ahead, Dr.
No, just Mr. Chairman, right now then, just for the board's understanding, currently that would be scheduled for January 24th, along with a Fitch presentation too. So just
Okay.
so people know the schedule.
Yeah, we worked, Sarah, Jill and I worked on the agendas this past week. So we'll go back and make sure we get it sooner than later and that it works with the agenda schedule. So good. All right, I would say from a board perspective, so we can keep moving and we can hear from our partners that are here. Anything else relative to that? Let's just send some emails in to the chair and Jill and Sarah, and we'll continue to coordinate that. So with that, we'll move over to the substitute conversation. So I'll open up to board questions around that. Go ahead, Sarah.
So I think the idea of building subs makes a whole lot of sense, considering, they're there all the time and, they are kind of the first line of defense when there's an absence. I don't know that anybody has a crystal ball, but if we were to move to this model, what do you think the fill rate would be? How many missing classes would we still have? How much more effective do you think this would be, I guess?
Okay.
The one thing I would just say is, so currently when we have building subs at 4 days a week, we actually build into the budget, almost like a turnover effect, because we know we're going to lose them during the year. So if you go to a 5-day week model, the likelihood of you getting turnover plus a higher rate kind of dwindles. So I would imagine, just based on that, your fill rate would be higher. Because at some point during the year, even this year, while we have building subs, not everybody's fully staffed with the building sub. And then you do typically lose them during the year because somebody was more attracted to go to a district that is currently offering a 5-day week. So if we're able to offer 5 days a week and we're able to offer $150 a day, and you can see from the chart above, really Stanford and New Canaan would be the only ones above us. And as I mentioned earlier, New Canaan's likely not to maintain that $274 a day. They did use some of their ESSER funds in the past to kind of subsidize that. And with those funds dwindling, that's probably not going to be sustainable. So just based on that, I would think it would help. And then adding that third should help, because right now a lot of the schools don't have interns to have that fill. So that lack of the interns coupled with the 4-day-a-week building sub is creating that low fill rate. So if you're able to have 5-day-a-week building subs in place of the interns that we can't currently fill, your fill rate should rise.
Mr. Brown, David.
Just following up, Rich, the flip side of that, I know this isn't a huge dollar number every year, but if, for instance, suddenly there weren't shortages, how long are these people, do we term? Is it an annual with them? Or like if we all of a sudden had to get rid of them in 3 years, let's say?
No, I mean, every year you could.
It's every year we read up. Thanks.
John.
Marge, would this attract more, not just from the existing pool of resources, if you will, by just raising their salary, but maybe bring people into the practice of being a building sub? I'm thinking retirees or something. Would they be able to double dip per se? And
They could double dip because we're not requiring that these people be certified. And the only thing that limits the ability to work after retirement is if you work in a certified position. I also think that the turnover would be less because we used to fill these with elementary teachers who couldn't get a job anywhere else, and then they would get a job and leave. Now those elementary teachers are gone. So I think that raising the rate would really have a pretty significant impact.
Good question. Jill.
I'd like some more information. First, I'd like an overall rich financial model of just substitutes. Please include building and interns, but I'd like to look at maybe past 2 years and then under this model, what the overall cost of substitutes would look like. Again, including interns. I'd love to understand a little more about the history of shortages. I understand that we have an existing teacher shortage. I hear what you just said about elementary school teachers and being able to use them, but I'd like to have a little bit of a run rate for what the shortages, the subs shortages look like over time. Has this 50% number been true for just this year or how long? And I'd also like to know, particularly for this year, maybe last year, if we can break out shortages versus absences. So I'd love to know, how much is being driven by not being able to fill versus, or I guess I'd like to know how much is being driven by teacher shortages versus teacher absences. If we have that information, that might not be easy. But I think it's important to know whether we have a sub shortage, but we also have a teacher shortage, how much of the teacher shortage is spiking our increases.
So does that just, because my add-on to that would be, which Rich has done over the years is, and I think where that question goes to is there's a difference here between day-to-day substitution in long-term substitutes for disability, FMLA and all that type of stuff. So, and you've separated that in the budget, but I think that's the other thing I would want clarity around. To Jill's point, substitutes for shortages are more long-term, right?
Right, so we wouldn't use, unless we were in dire straits, a non-certified person for a long-term rate. We get internal teachers to fill and we pay them, their rate. These are for those spot absences, and sometimes they fill in for Paris and whatever, but there is a difference. Like if we can't hire a science teacher, we get the science teachers to fill, and they've been great at doing that for us.
Okay, but we do or do not compensate that. We do, right?
You do come
Out of our sub line item.
Good. Katie.
Marge, when you said that the building subs would not be required to be certified staff, is that a change from past years?
So we would encourage in the first instance to hire certified people. As the year went on, even in better days, we weren't always able to find it, but even as a non-certified person, they help so much with, the daily operation of the school.
Are we, Jill?
Okay, so I get the point that we have in-house people subbing, but given that that is something that teachers have noted in their exit interview, the need to cover so many classes, it would still be helpful to understand, please, what that looks like in terms of how much shortages are driving what our sitting teacher population has to do to cover classes, please.
Good. We good on substitutes? DHS? All right, good. For those folks standing in the back, it's like the classroom thing. There are empty seats in the front row. And there are seats over there. I know some people like to stand, but that's fine. Luke, you should be in the front row. So we're running long, but that's fine because it's good, important conversations and some good follow-up here. So from a DHS RC1, we'll turn it over now. Any comments or questions from Board of Finance? I spoke to Mr. Palin. He unfortunately is traveling. I know some Board of Finance are paying attention. I think they're going to just submit questions to us. So RTM education, Ed and team.
Hi, Ed Budget. We've asked people to, let's just say this once for anyone who's watching. So we've asked people to text me any questions. So if I get any, I will be the spokesperson. So I'm not going to filter any of the questions that I may get. And I'm not going to try and be too repetitive if the board has asked questions. So just, I guess, one sort of general point, which really addresses the sort of three areas: subs, teen talk, and the increasing the FTE. So the way some of us will look at it is, even in the case of a consultant or teen talk program, that is an FTE equivalent. So we're looking at sort of staff and the cost that adds. And I think the things that you all are asking about, metrics and understanding in particular how this all sort of fits together, given in past years we have added school psychologists or counselors. So understanding, does this new staff free up those people to do other things? With respect to the FTE additions, I guess I just have, and this is me personally, a concern just sort of tied to cost, that we offer a lot of things to a lot of students, and students sometimes do have to choose one over the other. And to me, whether they are choosing to enter a PE class with 28 people so that they can take the AP French class that they want to take may just have to be one of those trade-offs, because it would seem to me that adding 2 FTEs for the high school when it's only increasing by 11 students is just not something that we can afford to do year after year after year. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. I will move on to RTM education. That was RTM education. Thank you. I guess I was trying to avoid Jack. Sorry, I had to start right away, Jack. RTM F&B. Okay, thank you, Jack. We will move on to CDSP.
Oh, we got Taylor.
Oh, okay, we'll come back. Come up, Deb. We'll come back to Taylor. No problem. We'll come back to you, Taylor.
Is that okay?
Well,
can
Taylor,
you-
we'll come back to you. I've got one person at the podium now.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Deborah Ritchie, co-chair of CDSP. We're structured pretty much the same as RTM Education, where we have a Google Doc and people send in their comments. So I'm not going to edit their comments. or questions. I'm just going to read them. And if you guys have already talked about it at the board table, we eliminate it. So we're not repetitive.
Thank you.
So on RC1, on the Teen Talk program, a lot of the questions that we had have been addressed. We look forward to the presentation. It is a program that many of us have heard of and talked about for several years. And it is in a lot of the DIRG schools, and overall, our members seem to approve of this program coming to DHS. The additional questions that we have are how much of the 90,000 goes towards fees and how much goes towards the actual salaries of the clinician. And if we understand correctly, it sounds like they will be available to DHS students after hours. If we need more clarity on that. And then again, we would like to see which schools are using Teen Talk and at what levels, middle school, high school, and how many at each school. The curriculum supervisor is down to 0.2 FTE, a little explanation on what they do. And then at a future meeting, can you discuss how the responsibilities of the department chairs have changed, particularly over the past 2 years as challenges to the curriculum have increased? Just a little bit of a follow-up on the China exchange program. We're guessing this is COVID related, and that's why the program has been stalled. And we would agree, we'd love to see what other programs we can do with an exchange rather than just travel to foreign countries. I think our students benefit from that exchange type program. Given the robust elective course selection, the honors and AP classes, as well as enrichment opportunities for our students, honor societies, robotics, post 53, et cetera, does it make sense to have a talented and gifted program at DHS? Clearly, the enrollment is continuing to decline. We look forward to hearing an update. I think we have a committee working on that, and we haven't really heard from the committee. So there is work going on behind the scenes. So we look forward to hearing and hopefully getting an update on the continued evaluation of the gifted and talented program, along with the accelerated math. With robotics, is there a gender balance in this club? And then on to the wellness coordinator. I'll just give my personal viewpoint. My son at DHS loves the wellness center and has benefited from it and goes to it virtually every day. In addition to the coordinator, who do they report to? Who will be working with? I think we talked a little bit about this. Having an org structure would be great. And the director of mental health will be working collaboratively to develop programming and directing students to clinical resources. Who will fill this position? Is it possible to fill this position with existing rotating staff or building subs? Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I think there's more. Sorry, that's not it. I thought that was the end. Have you thought about breaking mental health out into a separate RC? Our members are happy to see the addition of ASL since it has been discussed for several years. How many people do you expect to enroll in that program?
Thank you, Deb. We'll move over to CPAC. Anyone here from CPAC on Darien High School? Anyone online?
Trisha will be speaking for CPAC.
Great, Trish. Thank you.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So thanks, everybody. And we agree regarding the all the questions on the wellness coordinator. We had many of the same as the board, such as oversight and training. So we won't ask again. Thanks. And regarding sign language, we say thank you. And we support it heartily, as we support the science teachers also. And regarding the PD line, we noticed there was no increase on that line. But there are many new teachers and many new mental health initiatives. So we're wondering if there could be a breakdown on what is included in PD. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. We'll go back to Taylor Carter from Board of Finance.
Thanks, Duke. I think it's really to follow up on what Jill said and what seems to be common confusion. It says on the papers here that the Teen Talk counselors will collaborate with kids in crisis to ensure that support is available to students outside the school day. I want to just clear that up. I mean, is this really providing or preventing access to that 24-hour care?
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Taylor, from a Board of Finance?
Not for me, but Rob and John are both on too, so.
Any other hand raised?
No, only Miss Taylor Carter.
Good. All right. I want to thank all our partners there. I know it's a lot of coordinating the way you're working with texting, but not rehashing and, you know, kind of agreeing is much appreciated in a long day. So thank you for the way you're all managing that. It works. Yes,
One last thing.
sure.
Is that okay? The request for what world languages are being taught at our DERG A schools. Could we also look at what districts have exchange programs as part of that, please?
Sure.
If
I
we're,
will-
go- if we're gonna lump onto the languages, I'd also like to just understand enrollment in the languages. I know we talked about it a little bit when they were first introduced, but it's just helpful to see what our kids are studying. Thank you.
We'll move to public comment on RC1 Darien High School. Anyone in the audience? Anyone on Zoom, Michelle?
There are no raised hands at this time.
All right, great. Thank you. So we'll move on to RC2 Fitch Academy. Ellen, thank you for sticking with us.
That's okay. Thank you. So for Fitch, I would like to start by thanking the Board of Education and the community for supporting Fitch Academy. You know, when we're talking about mental health needs of our students at DHS, we know that Fitch Academy has been a very important part of our ability to respond to the needs of our students who require a different setting than the larger high school. And so I also want to thank Dennis Cabrera for his leadership at Fitch and the entire staff for their unwavering support of our students. They have created, as I know you know, an extraordinary community at Fitch. And while maintaining high expectations for our students, they honor them and their student voice and their curiosity and creativity. And it is a wonderful, wonderful program of Darien High School. So the opportunity to look at space came to us as the lease renewal is up for the beginning of the next school year. And we had some discussions with Nielsen's and the teachers and Dr. Adley about the possibility to make a small increase to the amount of space that Fitch is able to use on the property. And so there is a request to increase the square footage by 528 square foot in the new lease plan. And that will accommodate an additional small classroom and an additional small counseling space. These are two areas that will make a difference to the delivery of curriculum at Fitch and the responsiveness to student needs. There are times when another private room is important for students and the counseling staff at Fitch, and also free up some scheduling opportunities for course sections, another small classroom space, and a space that could be used as a study area for students as well. When not being used as a classroom, I think would be a tremendous benefit to Fitch. Additionally, you see on the budget that we've asked for a 0.2 increase for mathematics at Fitch. Currently, we have a 0.4 math teacher, which is equivalent to 2 math courses. At Fitch, we have the ability to often work with students in multiple courses at the same time because of the nature of the work there and the independent interaction of students with faculty. The demands of mathematics are such that when we have students from grades 9 through 12, over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in need for very specific content. And so we would ask for an additional section of math to accommodate the levels of math that we see our students requiring at Fitch. And those are the only 2 areas of change there.
Thank you, Ellen. Dr. Elliott, you wanted to add there? I know you've been working with the Nielsen's on the square footage. There's a lot of change going on in that whole complex over there, but I know he's been very accommodating.
Yeah, we couldn't have anybody who's more accommodating. I want to thank Dennis and Alan and all the students who are actually there in the program. Having witnessed in action, particularly the math sections. I mean, teaching 3 and 4 sections collectively together is it's hard under any situation, but whenever it's meant to be personalized, it's even more challenging. This extra space provides what Alan talked about, a classroom space and a private counseling area. Mr. Nielsen will be doing any work that needs to be done with it. It comes with a tag of about $17,000 for the additional space.
You know, just a shout out to Jerry Nielsen and his family for a big thank you for the continue to support us in this academy. So I will say, you know, we'll collect the questions on Fitch here, but we do have a Fitch Academy update on the 24th. So anything else that we discussed today, we can make sure it gets added to that agenda item. So I'll kick it over to Sarah.
Thank you. I'm excited for the update on the 24th because we haven't seen it in a while. And I would just like to add that a request that we put Fitch on our tour of the schools, because we have not seen that as the board member. And I've personally seen the space and I understand why there is the need, but I don't know that the other 8 of you understand why the need is there. So I just request that be added.
Good idea. Thank you. John.
One of the questions, if we could cover, are there any offsets by adding the math class on site? Because I know there are students that take basically attend Fitch, but also go to high school for classes. So is there any sort of offset in terms of students being able to stay at Fitch versus taking a seat or using a seat at the high school?
Dennis.
So I think to build on Mr. Sini's question and something Mrs. Dunn said before about science with the requirements, do we have the same restriction in teaching science at Fitch for a teacher who may not have all the credentials to be able to teach all of the subjects? And do we need to hire more FTEs for science? Or are we're comfortable with that? Second question is.
Currently, we're comfortable with that. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Second question is with the additional consulting area, and I echo Mrs. Perrins because I haven't been there in a long time. Does that in our budgeting for that additional counseling space, because I heard the word additional counseling space, is that going to prompt a FTE to fill said counseling space in this year and or next year?
I can't look into the future, but for this year, no. And actually, there's been no discussion of it for future years either.
Fair enough. And then just to echo what I asked about in DHS is, will the Fitch Academy students have access to Teen Talk and how so? But that can be at the larger discussion.
Thank you, Dennis. Julie.
Thank you. I would add for our discussion on the 24th, I think it is.
Yes.
Everyone always talks about the community at Fitch, and I'd love to understand that a little better. It sounds like there's a little magic there. And as we talk about kind of climate overall, at DHS, we sometimes have concerns about the community at DHS on a larger scale. So I don't know if there's anything we can be looking at that's working so beautifully at Fitch that can bring learnings back to DHS and vice versa. So I'd just like to have that be part of the conversation as well.
Thank you, Julie. Jill.
When we built the program, we set, as noted in the budget book, we set the cap at 24 with the belief that that was the highest number that could be accommodated effectively with this model. I'm concerned seeing us reach that number. So I'd love to take a look at enrollment and just talk in general about the implications. So I'd like to see a history of enrollment, but also have a conversation about if we have any concerns about what would happen if we tip that number in the near future. I know we can't control it.
I think it would be also wise, since it came up over the years, going way back when this conversation started, but in that update, just a quick update on, we have talked over the years about, could we generate revenue by opening this up to other districts? I know previous superintendents work closely with New Canaan. New Canaan has some things that they're doing on their own. So that's never played out, but I think we should just cover it as a line item, because invariably it will come up as a question.
Yeah, most are on their own at this point, but yes, yeah, that's right.
Good. Anything else on Fitch? All right, we will go over to Board of Finance. Any questions on RC2 Fitch Academy?
Thank you. We've actually collaborated and decided we're going to submit all of our questions in writing to save us some time.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. Appreciate that.
Yep.
That's fine if that's the way you want to do it. That's great. Thank you. We will move over to RTM education. Ed, you're good? Thank you, Ed. We'll move over to RTM F&B.
Jack Davis, 197 Hoyt Street. My first question is actually for Taylor. Taylor, can you copy me on those questions?
Gotta like.
The second thing, I just want to make a quick comment since you're going to talk about it later. Having been around since the time that Fitch was first created by Dr. Brenner, the concept of bringing in outside communities was initially denied by the board, not the administration. So there's some history there to go and look at when you're looking at it, that I just want to add into the mix when you are reviewing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. We'll move over to CDSP.
Hi, Sarah Gortella. We'll be quick with this one as a lot of our questions have been asked already. First, I'd like to just say I've also been around since the beginning of these discussions, and I'm a big supporter of Fitch, and happen to believe that it's saving the district a lot of money when you think of how much it costs for more therapeutic education. We're told that there's only 12 students currently attending Fitch. Why do you expect enrollment to double next year? Will outplaced students be returning to the district?
Thank you. We'll move over to CPAC. Michelle, anyone on Zoom?
Hi, Jamie Zanuck. Hi, good morning. We just have one question, which is the expenses by category for Fitch that are in RC 24.
What's that question, Jamie?
Oh, I'm sorry. We just have one. The expenses that are in RC 24 by category that are related to Fitch.
Okay.
Thank
Do
you.
understand that, Dr. Ellie? Okay, thanks, Jamie. All right,
There are no more raised hands at this time.
no more raised hands on Zoom. Okay, we'll open up to public comment. RC2 Fitch Academy. Any raised hands, Michelle?
No, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. We'll move on to RC11, Athletics and Physical Education, Chris Manfredonia. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I just think I need to have my video turned on, Michelle. Oh, there we go.
Yes, it's up in front. I would just ask Chris, you get as close to your microphone as possible. Thanks.
Yes, well, thank you, Mr. Dean. I just want to take an opportunity to also thank the board, the community, parents for the support of the athletic program. For the students that participate in our athletic program, it's such a robust offering. We have so many students who are involved in athletics at Darien High School. And that's by the work of the board and the support that the board offers the programs and the students who participate. So I want to first thank you for that support. I'm going to highlight a couple of additions and then one account you notice has gone down a bit and just explain the reasons why those increases or decreases are such. The first account I'll talk to is 1002. That's the interscholastic coaches budget. You'll see an increase there due to the negotiated contract with the DEA and the, I think, percent increase that goes along with that for next year. Also in that account, we have the request for additional assistant wrestling coach at the amount of $4,760. We've seen quite an increase in our wrestling program over the last couple of years. We're at over 40 students now currently in the team, and thus the request for a second assistant coach for that program. Account 52008, transportation, again, an increase in that account. We're all aware of the shortages of bus drivers that the state is dealing with. That is hitting the athletic program as well. As a result, we tried to move games around to accommodate when buses would become available to us, not always possible. As a result, we've had to schedule over the last year and a half, 2 years or so, an additional need for coach buses, which obviously comes at an increased cost. The budget in this account reflects that anticipated cost for next year as well. Account 10-2004, increase in interscholastic officials. This is the account that covers officials for our sporting contest, security as well. With the recent approval of P&Z to increase the number of night games we're going to have, we would also anticipate a need to have increased security at those night games, and both security monitors and police. This account would cover the increased cost to cover those security measures at those nightly events. And lastly, I want to talk to account 10-2001, which is our kind of all-encompassing equipment budget. You see a decrease in that budget for this year. We have taken out, because we will not be hosting the Turkey Bowl next year, so the cost associated with that event comes out for next year. We also have some new uniforms in a uniform replacement cycle, which I think the board has access to in the budget book. For those uniforms that are in the cycle for next year, those are accounted for in this budget line item as well.
Thank you, Chris. Any comments, Dr. Hadley?
No, the actual changes to the athletic department are fairly minor.
I'll open up to board questions or comments. Julie.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Could you walk us through how this budget is put together? Like, do your head coaches provide you with what their programs need for next year? And it's built from that, for example, or something else? And also, in doing that, what gets included? Is it sort of the bare minimum that you get, home and away uniforms, you get conference play, transportation? If you could just give us a little explanation about how that's done.
Sure. I think in the budget book, Rich included a breakdown of costs per sport. So that's how we start off. We start by sport, what the needs are for sport, including transportation, game personnel, officials, anticipated number of games, including what you mentioned, conference and state playoffs, the equipment needs for that team, where they fall in the replacement cycle in terms of uniforms in the 3-year cycle, and then any associated fees, whether it's a rental fee, whether it's a fee to participate in some of these invitational tournaments or state tournaments. And so we take that information by sport and we create, an Excel spreadsheet of what each sport will cost, coaches, stipends as well, included in there, and build it from, basically zero to what you see in front of you there.
Can I just add?
Yes, go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. And does that mean, is there a filter on what invitational tournaments, for example, we would fund, or what, is there a cutoff for transportation, so to speak? Like, we'll cover conference play, but we won't cover scrimmages and, invitational tournaments, as an example.
It will typically in this budget cover one away scrimmage per team. And then if they want to have others, we'll either host or be limited to just that one away. In terms of tournaments, we always will budget for a state tournament, which our teams are participating in. And we'll also, for some of the individual sports like track or wrestling, budget for, additional in-season tournaments as well.
Thank you.
John.
Chris, could you provide the revenues per sport, gate fees? I know, I think, what is it? Football and basketball are the only ones that routinely charge entrance fees, or?
Yeah, I don't have that number, John, right in front of me here. I don't know
Sure.
if Rich has that. If not, we can certainly get that information to you.
Yeah, that's fine. And just any other, like, if you could break out, Rich, or the revenue, any revenues, because I know some tournaments, there are entrance fees into the gym and that sort of thing.
So football, excluding the Turkey Bowl, is typically around $9,500 to $10,000 a year. And then basketball's much less. That's about $1,200 a year. There are certain revenues that are collected that then go to the CIAC depending on the actual game itself. But the revenue we collect is just basketball and football. And obviously, the years in which we have a Turkey Bowl, you'll see a big spike in the revenue. And the year we don't have the Turkey Bowl, you see the big drop.
And I guess the follow-up is there any reason not to charge entrance fees for these night games, which carry extra costs for and draw a large crowd like soccer games or field hockey, or I'm thinking of lacrosse, certainly. When we have those Friday night games, it typically generates it's a great community event, but we might as well. Is there a reason we don't, I guess is my question, or it's just practice that we haven't?
I think it's just past practice, John. We haven't done that in the past. Something we can certainly look at. Keep in mind, we also do not charge deer and high school students to attend any game of ours. Yeah. So, when we see large crowds, we're not charging our students to attend as long as they have a student ID with them.
And away students too, is that practice, or do you charge them?
Our practice has been deer and high school students at our home games.
Got it.
I'm not sure I heard that. So
All students I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought I heard all students.
We for our home games, we do not charge deer and high school students, but we would charge the visiting students to attend, just as they would charge our students to attend their home games.
So visitors pay as we get our when we're visitors, we have to pay. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Thanks. Tara. I was looking at Keith.
I know a lot of sports pay, parents and students are asked to pay outside fees for different items. I would like to see a breakdown of that too. So we really get an idea of what each sport is paying and what those fees are for.
Katie, right. In the budget book, there is what the Board of Ed charges, those mandatory fees for those rental sports and including sailing. But Tara, like you mentioned, there are sports that do have optional team fees to cover those items in the budget that are not covered by the Board of Ed. And we can certainly get that information to you if you'd like.
So what you're looking for in this is what the parents are paying.
Right. I know football is being asked to pay a lot. I'm hearing that there's some fees that are like from past years, some deficits from pandemic years that parents are being asked to pay. Those kind of things is what I'm looking for. So we get a look at really what exactly is happening.
On page 144.
But that's not for all sports.
Yeah, this is the rentals. This is rentals.
Oh,
okay.
Those are rentals. Yeah.
Offsite.
So I get to clarify, to build on Tara's question, is Chris, the fee line in the spreadsheet on page 142, are those parent fees that the parents are paying, or is that fees associated with the sports that the district is paying?
Those are fees that are associated with what the district is paying.
Okay, so that's not the parent.
What the parents will supplement. So a couple of years ago, the board went to a 70-30 split for those fees, whereas the parents will pay 70% of the cost of the fee associated with the sport, the rental sports, and then the Board of Ed pays 30%.
Right, but I think what Tara and I are both saying is that there are fees that parents are asked to pay outside of this.
Yeah.
So like my daughter was on the swim team, I had to pay an extra fee. What is that fee per team and what does that fee go towards?
Sure. And those fees that would be asked of parents would be optional, but we can certainly get you that information.
Understood, but there's still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess what the ask is on 144, that is not a complete list of costs associated with parents.
Right. That's just a list of costs. That's the Board of Ed budget.
Those are just the mandatory fees.
Right.
Page 144. So there are what's called voluntary fees that hit the student activity account.
Okay.
And they vary by sport depending on the sport. So we can put that together.
Great.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Rich.
Good question. Thank you, Tom. Katie had her hand up a while ago. Go ahead, Katie.
Thank you. I wanted to just follow up a little bit on the question that Julie was asking. In terms of how the budget is put together, I appreciate the answers that you went through. And a lot of what you detailed makes sense that the athletic director would do in terms of stipends and officials. I'm curious about coaches' input. And as we talk about just kind of understanding and looking into the culture of our schools, athletics is a big part of our culture. And I would just be interested to know how the process works as far as coach input by sport as it relates to budget and team coming up the chain to the athletic director and beyond.
Chris, you can answer that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we do certainly get coaches' input in terms of what their needs would be from year to year, in terms of if it's additional coach, if it's additional equipment, uniforms, replacements, things like that. So there is input from coaches to the athletic director in terms of what their needs would be for year to year in the athletic budget.
Are you good, Katie? Okay, good. Dave.
I had a follow-up and a new question, so just following up on these voluntary fees, do we have written policy around that? It's kind of a new one on me. I haven't heard that previously. What triggers that? When does it come in? Is there a certain dollar amount? Where is this written? Is this new? Just would like to know where this is coming from in general. And then two, in terms of the coaches' stipends, I do the math and it seems to be there's some variation in what that number is. So I'm curious as to what the formula is that determines what the coach stipend is.
Rich, you want to comment on that?
So all the coaches' stipends are spelled out in the DEA contract. So football, for example, is different than wrestling. Wrestling might be different than swimming. So they're all spelled out by sport. And then depending on the sport and how big the sport is will determine how many coaches are assigned.
Sarah.
I have a bunch of questions about this transportation in the spreadsheet. So the transportation, is this only for SEAC games, matches, tournaments, whatever? Like, do you budget for only SEAC from game number 1 through states? Or are there additional like outside? It's my understanding that some teams travel, to New Jersey or whatever for tournaments. Is that included in this, even though it's not SEAC?
So we would budget for any trip up to the maximum number of games per sport, and that varies by sport, including the playoff games, both FCAC and CAAC. That would include a team's out-of-state competitions if they choose to have them. That would include the school bus costs for those trips.
Okay, so those are not the outside, tournaments or whatever that teams choose to go to.
If the team is going on an overnight trip, the policy has been that the team will cover the cost of that bus trip.
Are there any SEAC related things that are overnight?
Unless you're talking about, a track New England competition, which the Board of Ed approves every June. Those, depending on how many kids qualify, may or may require a bus.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they just wildly vary, and I'm very like, why is baseball and basketball $17,000? Like, there's that many more games.
Yeah. No, it depends on the level too. So they will have more levels per sport for those sports versus, for example, gymnastics, which is just at one level.
Right. And there's that difference between the boys and girls ice hockey as well, because there's more teams of hockey. Okay.
So we have a varsity and JV boys team and just a varsity girls team.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. Dave, I wanted to ask you, we have the policy question. Is your question answered on the stipends, or do you need any more info on that?
No, I'm good on that one.
Okay,
That's
good.
fine.
Go ahead.
I did have a quick follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
You may as well jump in. And the transportation, Rich, do we bid that out? Is that competitive? How do we actually go with the vendor there?
So it's a 5-year contract. So next year is the last year of that 5-year contract. The biggest issue we have for sports is we are still short drivers in general. So last year we were short about 6 or 7 drivers. This year we're short about 3 drivers. What ends up happening is we don't have enough drivers to get to the high school to pick up the kids at, let's say, 2:30. Because if we were to do that, then we couldn't pick up the elementary students. And so what ends up happening is they have to get a charter bus, which are obviously more expensive than the first student bus. So we did reference in RC 25 about regular transportation. It is set to go to bid next year, but you should not expect any savings given what's been happening across the state due to the driver shortage.
Thanks.
I think just to clarify, it's a good question, Dave. So the school bus contract that just transports our kids are the same buses and drivers that do all this sports transportation.
So they do sports and field trips. If they can't accommodate the sport because we don't have enough drivers,
Right.
that's when you might go out to like a third-party charter vendor that you would have. But ideally, the most you would rather have first student do all of them if you could. But we just don't have the capacity of drivers.
So sorry, Rich, just to follow up and clarify, the 5-year contract you referenced, is that with the coach provider or is that with the?
It was first student.
So what is the process used for the coach provider?
So with the coach provider, it's typically get 3 quotes as best as you can. And if you can get 3 quotes with somebody who can service on that day, it's even better. A lot of times what ends up happening is you get 1 quote because the other 2 might not be able to do that day, or you might get 2 quotes because the third might not be able to do it that day. And it's basically, try to get what you can get.
And so that's not a 5-year contract on the coach. That's just a day.
Correct.
And does it make any sense to try and get something? Do we have a foreseeable schedule?
So most of those companies won't actually go into a contract because they're also doing, let's say, like wedding venues and party venues and things like that. So they typically won't tie into a contract, a long-term contract. It's mostly if they have available buses available for students.
Got it. Thank you.
Katie, Tara. Should go back to last names, right? Any more coffee?
I actually just asked a question about the weight room, and the hours that that's open, and if it were, I believe it's not open as often as it used to be, and wondering if there's a cost associated with that for supervision. The reasons why it wouldn't be open all the time, and if it were, what it would cost.
So we open the weight room after school, any day the school is in session from 2:30 to 4 o'clock. And we pay a supervisor $50 per session to supervise that space.
But there were additional hours previously. Am I correct? Or is it always?
I don't know if we had last year's budget or not. We do have the 2 spaces. Both rooms that we try to supervise have. So it would be a second person in there, one in each room.
Chris, Chris, if you could just slow down a minute and just go back, you're cutting in and out.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
What are the current hours, and over the last couple of years, have those hours changed?
So the current hours are 2:30 to 4 o'clock every day after school. That's in session. We have the 2 rooms. We have the fitness center and then the team room. Then we try to have a supervisor in each space. I think there was a decrease in offerings. I can't recall. I'd have to go back and look at last year's budget or the year before that. But that's what we typically, in terms of schedule, have available to students after schools from 2:30 to 4 o'clock in the 2 spaces.
So it was never open during the school day?
It's not open during the school day, no.
Ever? Okay.
I mean, for PE classes only.
Sarah.
I'm going to go back to the buses because I'm still not clear on this. So it's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that teams can opt to upgrade to the coach bus, but using the money that they've fundraised with. Is that true?
Correct. If a team, let's say, is going on a longer bus trip and they're requesting a coach bus and a school bus is available, this team student activity fund would be charged the difference between a school bus and a coach bus cost.
Okay. For me, that brings up a big equity issue because larger teams can fundraise a lot more than smaller teams can. And it's my understanding that there are some teams this fall that had to travel up to Hartford that needed the coach buses for bathrooms and comfort, whatever, and then couldn't pay for their banquet at the end of the year. So parents were asked to float the difference. So I think we have an issue of, should there be a policy or guidelines, if you travel beyond 45 miles or whatever, outside of Darien, you get a coach bus. I feel, we've talked about this equity in athletics for years and years and years, but I do feel like there's the ability for the larger teams to be able to raise more money than the smaller teams. And I don't necessarily think that that's how we should be functioning. I just throw that out there.
Good points. Jill.
I have 2 questions also on buses. Rich, I just wanted to understand, there's 2 drivers that you're indicating are increasing the cost of busing this year. One is the coach buses due to availability, and then the second is fuels, short increases. Are we able to substantiate approximately what the increase in shortages is, what that
Sure.
financial impact is?
So it's also the contractual increase. So there's 3. The contractual increase is about 4% of the total. We probably are unable to fill close to a third, maybe even more, of our athletic buses this year, which is actually an improvement from the prior year. So actually, if you look at the historical actuals from the prior year, you'll actually see it was far more than the budget, and that is again due to the charters. But we're probably about a third short of competitions of where we'd like to be. And again, it's a product of not having enough drivers. Typically what happens is the bus company has 6 spare drivers, and what's supposed to happen is those are the primarily ones to fill if there's like an absence, and then they're also available for those runs for like athletics or field trips or things like that. But when you're 3 short, what ends up happening is those existing 3 spares typically will cover for somebody who's absent or sick, and then you have nobody for charters. It's only when those 3 are actually available because you're fully staffed and nobody's out that you're able to then cover for charters or field trips.
Okay.
They need to look at their substitute model.
So back of the envelope, what's that dollar amount-ish of that 1/3? What's the impact to us?
I would probably about $14,000 of the 24.
Okay. Then I have another
Go ahead.
question, but it's
Sure.
not buses. I wanted to talk a little bit about unified sports. I think I wanted to confirm, I see the enrollment on this chart. Is that because we have unified sports at different levels? Or is this just high school enrollment, or is this elementary school through high school?
This is just the high school enrollment.
This is just the high school model. Okay. It's a healthy number, which is great. I'd like to confirm whether or not we think the existing coaching ratio is enough for what the program needs to do, because those kids, we have 37 kids. I assume those are kids with needs who are enrolled, but they're also supported by typical models. So it's a pretty big program. So I'd love to just talk about the coaching ratio and how that works. And then I was looking at the uniforms. I'm glad to see uniforms for unified actually budgeted for. So just anyway, if you could just talk a little bit about the program, and that doesn't have to be today.
Okay. Katie.
Thank you. Chris, I just wanted to ask about professional development. I see the line item here in 2503 for professional development at $2,000, which has been the number for several years. But I was curious if you could talk a little bit about what that professional development covers and what type of professional development you're offering to coaches specifically, and maybe especially to coaches who might not be staff and teachers.
Yeah, so that professional development is specific to athletics. Any PD that we would do with our coaches in terms of mental health, which I think you're referring to, would be covered through the not the athletic budget. So that professional development line item you see there is really for our first aid for coaches to attend sports specific professional development opportunities, and the other PD that we would offer for coaches would come from the Board of Ed budget in terms of Chris Transberg budget.
You good, Katie? Okay. Dave.
Thanks, Duke. I'm just looking at line item 73001, which is the equipment and furniture. I see this year the request is for $6,000. I'm looking also at last year's budget, which was a request for exactly $6,000, and according to actuals was spent $6,000 precisely, which is pretty fantastic to me. I also look back to 2018, 19, 22, 20, or 19, 20, and I see that the requested and the actuals match year in, year out on this line item. I'm just curious as to what this line item is made up with and how in our zero-based budgeting, we're able to actually capture this perfectly every year in and out.
In the past, we've used that line item for basketball, backboard replacement, rim replacement, both at the high school and home school. So in the near future, that's what we've used that line item for.
So just to reference, the request has typically been 6,000, but the expenses have been $4,900, $4,950, $3,340. Currently this year, the budget's 6, and we've spent about $2,200. So it hasn't matched exactly that. But as Chris mentioned, it's primarily like wrestling mat tape. It could be, portable like turtles for like baseball, things like that.
Julie.
Thank you. 2 quick ones, I think. High school intramurals, we have $4,000 budgeted. What intramurals are we running at the high school?
Yeah, in the past, we've run like an open gym for either basketball or volleyball.
Okay.
High school.
And those costs are associated with having the gym opened or supervised, or what are those costs for?
Supervision.
Okay. And protective gear, you mentioned in your commentary, protective gear for boys lacrosse and football. I don't see protective equipment in the uniform schedule. Is it somewhere that I can see? Do other sports have protective equipment? And do we replace protective equipment for those sports, any sports that have it annually, or what, how does that work?
So we do. That would also include, it's not mentioned there, but like baseball, softball, batting helmets, football, shoulder pads, and there is replacement for those, as well. We send those out to be certified every year. And if they come back and are rejected, then we replace them. Otherwise, they come back and are recertified for the following year.
Good, Julie. Dennis.
Thank you. So I'm trying to pencil, it's a tiny amount, but I'm trying to pencil something in on wrestling. You say, I thought you said that the wrestling team is up to 40 wrestlers now. And on the chart, it shows 25 participants, 2 coaches. So are we going up to, in 2023, 24 to 40 participants with 3 coaches? Or are we going to 40 and 2?
So we're going up to, so when that gets created, it's before the winter season starts, that document you're looking at. So we're looking at last year's winter season number.
Okay.
Wrestling starts early December, which is after the budget book is, goes to print. So we're at currently 41 wrestlers, and asking for the 3rd coach, head coach, and then 2 assistants for next year.
Okay, thank you. And can I build on that? Because there's something that bothers me with, I like this chart on, and I think Jill was touching on it on the number of coaches per students. The dilemma is you look at something like, I don't know, hockey. We'll take boys hockey, girls hockey. They just say hockey and a number and a coach. But there's JV hockey for boys, there's only 1 for girls, and it's hard to delineate which sports have multiple layers of teams versus 1. So I think it would be helpful for me at least to see this broken down by coach per number of athletes they're responsible for, by JV, varsity, sophomore team, whatever it may be, freshman team.
Thank you, Dennis. Tara.
To start just wearing a name tag.
Yes.
So I see where we have uniforms. Swim dive has suits and caps listed as in the uniform replacement cycle. I'm curious because having had a diver, I always purchased a suit. So I'm curious, it's saying that that's part of the replacement cycle, but the parents are asked to pay for it. I think that goes back to the fees. Second, this isn't really sports related. It's entire budget related. I know it's been asked for in the past, but I think all the questions we're having regarding sports and what's paid for here and there, I think we really need to look at OpenGov, because I think we really need to be able to see exactly what's being spent where.
Thank you, Tara. Sarah.
I just have a quick question. Line 121000, improvement of sites. What does that mean? How is that different from regular maintenance?
It's the porta potties on the fields.
It's the what? Bodies. Improvement of sites. All right.
Sarah, do you need any more information
No,
on that?
all set. Thank you.
I like the title.
Yeah. Good. Go ahead, Jill.
I have another question, or it's sort of 2-part. On the protective equipment, that's defined by SEAC, correct? So for example, I've gotten a question over multiple years, particularly in the wake of the more recent hockey tragedies, over whether or not a neck guard is part of equipment, protective equipment for that sport specifically. I've also been asked if, and it was in the context of hockey, but I think it could be true for other sports, if sports with multiple tiers, if the parents pay the same amount, if you have I don't know exactly how hockey works, but if you have a freshman hockey player versus a JV versus a varsity, is that fee the same? And do you get the same output? I think in the case of hockey, it has to do with ice time. So that's
First part, yes, those neck guards would be, that's a NFHS, which is the National Federation of High School requirement that they were. So we would provide that for our hockey players, both boys and girls. And then in terms of the fees that are paid, it is the same fee on the boys' side for both JV and varsity.
do they get the same ice time, et cetera, for those fees?
They get the same amount of games. They probably don't get as much practice time. It's close, and we try to narrow that gap every year, but I would say if you look at it comparison wise, it's not exactly the same in terms of practice games, practice slot device.
Thank you.
Anything else on athletics for Mr. Manfredonia? All right, good. Bear with us another minute. Chris, we'll go out to our partners here. Board of Finance is going to submit any questions. We will go over to RTM Education. We're good. Thank you, Ed. We'll go over to RTM F and B. Thank you, Jack.
Jack Davis, and the coffee has kicked in. We're sitting here with a 5% increase in the budget. Maybe it's time we start looking at things a little differently this year than we have in the past. So I have a couple of things here, some are comments, some are questions. First, I support Mr. Sini's discussion of Friday night lights charging a fee, especially since the land maintenance might have an increased cost there.
Jack, can you just make sure that microphone's up? Thank you.
Plan for transportation for tournaments. So what's the transportation cost since you're planning for tournaments for virtually every sport? What have you put in the budget for each of them? And historically, over the last couple of years, what have you actually spent on that? So if we have 20 sports and everybody has a tournament, but only 10 of them are going to tournaments, then that's excess funds. Also for that, what's the travel plan for varsity, JV, and freshman by sports? A follow-up on Dennis's question. It comes down also that every town is in the same boat with the lack of bus drivers. This might be a good year or two to figure out, and I had all my kids play sports here, so it's not that. Do we still need to have the same number of JV sports and freshman sports throughout the system? That's something that should be up for option at this stage of the game because you have a 5% increase in budget. For the smaller teams, can we use our Suburbans to bring people to the instead of a bus? What's the equipment actual average spend over the last 3 years? Follow up on Mr. Brown's question. So if we're putting in 6,000, and honestly, I typically don't look at anything that's less than 85,000 because it doesn't move the needle. But this year, $2,000, $3,000, and $4,000 amounts are going to help this budget. And that's it for right now. I'll follow up. Oh, one more thing. Consistency on what safety equipment are we paying by sport? So I know in football, we provide uniforms, same thing with hockey. Do we provide the goggles for the girls on lacrosse? What do we do? What do we not do on safety equipment across each of the sports? Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. CDSP?
Hi, Sarah Gortel, CVSP. So we have $10,000 to cover added night events due to the expanded use of the lights. The question is, does this include community usage of the lights? In terms of gate seats, it's our understanding that the Booster Club gives away tickets as a part of their fundraising. And does this affect revenue is the question. Around coaching. So when there's an ask for an additional coach, what's the determination for adding or denying the request? Are there any sports that have coaches working with athletes that are not rostered or counted in your spreadsheet? So I think I think it was Dennis that asked about just a coaching, so athletes and coaches per. Are there any that are not rostered as well? Would be something to look at that. This is just small, but it's our understanding that Darien students actually are required to pay to attend home hockey games. So we just wanted to clarify that.
Say that again.
Home hockey games.
Students are required to what?
pay.
Okay.
Yeah. Seems like there's a lot of questions about athletics across the board, asking for a deep dive report on athletics in general, like the one we had on the gifted program 2 years ago. Jill mentioned unified. We also were happy to see uniforms included, but we would like to see more information on unified, just feeling like there may be some possible equity issues, length of season, coach ratio, access to facilities. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. CPAC? Anyone on the phone, Michelle?
There are no raised hands at this. Oh,
Oh,
wait.
wait, sorry.
Okay. Hi, Tricia.
Hi, yeah, Tricia Bresnahan, for CPAC. So, regarding the unified sports budget, we also noticed that, there are a lot more participants and many of the, high school sports have more than one coach if they have that many participants. And, we would understand or would assume that that participant is all kids because it's a unified team. So all students are on the team, doesn't matter your ability. And for the budget, looks like it's way below right now. Maybe that was because the spring tournament got canceled. Wondering where that leftover money goes, if it goes back into the unified budget. And the fall unified ended in the beginning of November. And as of now, it hasn't started again the winter season where the rest of the sports started at the end of November. So it's been at least a 9-week break. And we don't know yet which days, which I think is hard for planning purposes. Not sure if that has to do with facilities or what, but nobody knows whether you're a 3-season unified athlete or you're one that plays football, but you're going to do unified in the winter. It's really hard for planning purposes if you don't know which days the unified will meet. And in addition, with the focus on mental health, as Mrs. Dunn mentioned, while it seems obvious, there was a new study just released that found that teens who participate in sports, this study did 3 days a week, but that they were less likely to show symptoms of depression, and those who are already depressed showed the most benefit from this. So with Unified has grown in participants and the kids love it from what we've heard. And this, we wouldn't be asking for more for a crappy program. The kids love it. The coach is wonderful. The assistant coaches are amazing and the kids are really doing well and it's growing. So we would just love to see that some more consistency and some more access to fields and other facilities, and that the amount of time that the winter, spring, fall, just like the other, comes somewhere close to the other high school sports. Thanks.
Thank you, Tricia. We will move over to public comment on RC 11, athletics and physical education. Anyone in our audience? Anyone on the Zoom, Michelle?
No raised hands.
Okay, good. It is, go
Mr.
ahead.
Seedy.
Go ahead, Mr. Sini.
Just in conjunction with the Booster Club question, if you could come back and give us the number that they donate also on an annual basis. And then just, Mr. Chairman, if I could, there's a lot of policy questions tied into a lot of these budget questions, and some appropriate to budget, some totally separate. We always get down those wormholes.
Yep.
So I would ask that we administration divides those, but
yes.
And then when our schedule allows, maybe we
Yes.
can put that on the longer term schedule.
Yep,
addressing
agreed.
these
Thank you for bringing that up. Good question. Good comment. With that, we will take, it says a 10-minute break at 10:30. We're a little beyond that. We will take a quick break for bathrooms, coffee, and et cetera. So give us about 5 minutes and we'll be back. You good, Michelle?
Yes.